It was 1970. America's horsepower war had reached a level that seemed almost insane. Dealers were selling cars that could run the quarter mile in the low 13s straight off the showroom floor. Insurance companies were panicking, tire manufacturers were struggling to keep up, and on drag strips across the country, one name was starting to terrify the competition: LS6. Not an engine family, not a platform, just two letters and a number. And behind that code was one of the most brutal production engines ever installed in an American car, the Chevy 454 LS6, a giant 7.4-liter monster that made so much torque it could twist driveline components into scrap metal. An engine that was officially rated at 450 horsepower, but almost certainly produced much more. An engine so powerful that many people still consider it the greatest factory big block Chevrolet ever built. But what almost nobody knows is that the LS6 wasn't supposed to become a legend. In fact, it was born during a moment when the entire muscle car era was already beginning to collapse, and what happened next would cement its reputation forever. To understand the LS6, you have to understand the war that created it. By the late 1960s, every major American manufacturer was obsessed with one thing: horsepower. Ford had the 428 Cobra Jet. Chrysler was unleashing the 426 Hemi. Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Buick, and Chevrolet were all fighting for supremacy. Every year brought bigger engines, higher compression, more aggressive camshafts, more speed, and Chevrolet wasn't interested in finishing second. The company already had its legendary Mark IV big block architecture. Introduced in 1965, it featured a deep skirt block design, large ports, and incredible strength. The platform began with engines like the 396 and eventually expanded into larger displacements. Then Chevrolet engineers decided to push things even further. The result was the 454 cubic inch big block with a massive 4.25-inch bore and a 4.00-inch stroke. Displacement grew to 454 cubic inches, or 7.4 liters. That alone made it impressive, but displacement wasn't enough. Chevrolet wanted dominance, and dominance required something special. That's where the LS6 entered the picture. The development didn't happen overnight. Engineers spent countless hours testing different combinations. They experimented with various camshaft profiles. They tested different cylinder head designs. They pushed compression ratios higher than most thought reasonable. Each modification brought the engine closer to its potential, and closer to the edge of what was practical for street use. At first glance, the specifications looked outrageous. Compression ratio, 11.25 to 1. That was extremely high even by muscle car standards. Most engines of the era ran compression ratios between 9.0 and 10.5 to 1. The LS6 went well beyond that. This meant the engine required premium fuel. Not just recommended it, required it. Fill the tank with regular gas and detonation would destroy the engine. The pinging sound of pre-ignition was a death sentence. Cylinder heads could crack, pistons could melt, ringlands could break. So owners learned quickly: premium fuel only, no exceptions. The cylinder heads used enormous rectangular intake ports designed to maximize airflow at high RPM. These weren't the standard oval ports found on lesser engines. These were massive rectangular passages that could flow tremendous amounts of air. The intake ports measured significantly larger than even the high-performance 396 engines. The exhaust ports were equally impressive. Large valves completed the package. Intake valves measured over 2 inches in diameter. Exhaust valves weren't far behind. The combination allowed the engine to breathe like nothing else in Chevrolet's lineup. A solid lifter camshaft provided aggressive valve timing. This wasn't the smooth, quiet hydraulic setup found in Grandma's Impala. This was a mechanical roller setup that required periodic adjustment. Valve lash needed checking. Clearances had to be maintained. The engine wasn't designed for drivers who ignored maintenance. It demanded attention. It demanded respect. The camshaft specifications were radical for a street engine. Lift was substantial. Duration was long. Overlap was significant. At idle, the engine produced a distinctive lope. That unmistakable sound told everyone nearby that something serious was under the hood. Forged internals improved durability. The pistons were forged aluminum rather than cast. The crankshaft was forged steel. Connecting rods were heavy-duty forgings. These weren't cost-saving measures. These were components designed for extreme stress, because Chevrolet knew what owners would do with this engine. They'd beat on it. They'd race it. They'd push it to the absolute limit. And the engine needed to survive. An 800 CFM Holley 4-barrel carburetor fed the giant engine. This carburetor was massive by contemporary standards. 4 barrels, double pumpers on some versions, vacuum secondaries on others. The primary bores handled normal driving. The secondary bores opened when the driver demanded full power. And when those secondaries opened, everything changed. Fuel consumption went from terrible to catastrophic. The engine would drain a fuel tank in minutes under hard acceleration. But nobody buying an LS6 cared about fuel economy. The official rating? 450 horsepower at 5,600 revolutions per minute, and 500 pound-feet of torque at 3,600 revolutions per minute. But many historians and engine builders believe the true output was much higher. Some estimates place actual power closer to 500 horsepower in factory trim. A few insiders suggest the number might have approached 520 horsepower. Why the discrepancy? Because manufacturers in that era often underrated engines. Higher advertised horsepower attracted unwanted attention from insurance companies and regulators. The industry had developed an unspoken agreement. Keep the numbers reasonable on paper. Let the performance speak for itself on the street. Sometimes the numbers on paper weren't the numbers on the dyno, and the LS6 was one of the biggest examples. Independent dyno testing years later confirmed what drivers already knew. The engine made significantly more power than advertised. In some cases, completely stock examples produced nearly 500 horsepower at the wheels. After accounting for drivetrain losses, that suggested flywheel numbers well above the advertised rating. Chevrolet had built something truly special, and then tried to hide just how special it really was. Most people don't realize just how extreme this engine really was. A standard family sedan in 1970 might have produced 150 horsepower. The LS6 produced roughly 3 times that amount. Economy cars struggled to reach 100 horsepower. Many popular models barely achieved 200 horsepower. The gap between mainstream transportation and the LS6 was enormous, and it delivered its power with a kind of violence that shocked drivers. Touch the throttle, and the car surged forward. Even gentle inputs produced dramatic results. The engine responded instantly, no turbo lag, no waiting for power, just immediate overwhelming thrust. Floor it, and the rear tires immediately fought for traction. On dry pavement, the tires would break loose. On wet pavement, forget about it. The car would spin the tires through multiple gears if the driver wasn't careful. Traction control didn't exist. Stability control was science fiction. The only thing controlling wheel spin was the driver's right foot and their survival instinct. The torque curve felt endless. Unlike modern engines that make peak power in a narrow RPM range, the LS6 pulled hard everywhere. Low-end torque was staggering, mid-range power was brutal. High RPM performance was shocking for such a large engine. The power didn't fade, it didn't hesitate, it just kept coming, wave after wave of acceleration, until the driver lifted, or ran out of road, or ran out of courage. But there was a problem. Making huge power was easy. Keeping everything alive was much harder. The massive torque output exposed weaknesses throughout the drivetrain. Clutches failed. The manual transmission clutches weren't always up to the task. Owners reported clutch life measured in weeks, not years. Aggressive launches could destroy a clutch in a single afternoon. Replacement became a regular maintenance item. U-joints broke. The universal joints connecting the drive shaft to the differential couldn't handle repeated abuse. They'd snap under hard launches. The distinctive clunk of a failed U-joint became a familiar sound. Rear tires disappeared in clouds of smoke. Tire life was measured in miles, not thousands of miles. Aggressive drivers could destroy a set of rear tires in a weekend. The combination of massive torque and limited tire technology created serious problems. Transmission components suffered enormous stress. Gear sets wore quickly. Synchronizers failed. Automatic transmissions overheated, shift linkages bent, everything connected to that engine experienced forces it was barely designed to handle. Mechanics quickly learned that the engine wasn't always the weak link. Everything connected to it had to survive as well. Rear axles needed upgrading, drive shafts required strengthening, suspension components wore faster, even the chassis experienced increased stress. The entire car had to work together. Otherwise, something would break, and then the real testing began. Chevrolet installed the LS6 primarily in the Chevelle SS. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454, equipped with the LS6 package, became one of the most feared muscle cars ever sold. The combination was nearly perfect. The Chevelle provided a relatively lightweight platform. The intermediate-sized body was smaller than a full-size Impala, but larger than a compact Nova. The proportions were ideal for performance. Weight distribution was reasonable. The chassis could handle the power. Mostly. The package wasn't cheap. The LS6 option added significant cost to an already expensive performance car. Base price for a Chevelle SS was substantial. Adding the LS6 engine pushed the total even higher. Then buyers added other options: heavy-duty transmission, performance rear axle, better cooling system, upgraded suspension. The final price could exceed what many families paid for a house down payment. Yet buyers lined up anyway, because nothing else felt quite like it. Contemporary road tests recorded quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range. Car and Driver tested one extensively. Motor Trend published impressive numbers. Hot Rod magazine pushed the cars even harder. Some magazine testers achieved runs around 13.1 seconds at over 107 miles per hour. These were factory-stock vehicles. No modifications, no tricks, just what Chevrolet installed at the factory. Under ideal conditions with slicks and tuning, many owners pushed into the 12-second range. Drag racers removed the street tires, they installed racing slicks, they adjusted timing, they removed unnecessary weight, and suddenly the cars were running deep into the 12S. Some approached the 11-second range. That was supercar territory. Remember, this was a factory street car, with license plates, a warranty, and a radio. You could drive it to work on Monday, race it on Saturday, drive it to church on Sunday. The versatility was remarkable. That kind of performance was almost unbelievable in 1970, especially when many sports cars costing far more couldn't keep up. European exotics with exotic price tags fell behind. Expensive imports with impressive pedigrees lost races. The LS6 Chevelle embarrassed cars costing twice as much, 3 times as much. The performance per dollar equation was unbeatable. One automotive journalist reportedly described the experience as trying to harness a thunderstorm. That wasn't far from the truth. The big block's power delivery was relentless. From a stoplight, the car felt unstoppable. The engine would bog slightly as the clutch engaged. Then the torque would hit, the front end would rise, the rear tires would claw for grip, and the car would launch forward like it was shot from a cannon. On the highway, passing power seemed limitless. Cruising at 70 miles per hour in top gear, the engine loafed. It barely worked. Throttle response was instant. Downshift to third gear and the acceleration was violent. Passing became effortless. Merging was never a concern. And on drag strips, competitors learned a painful lesson. Never underestimate a 454. The Chevelle didn't look particularly intimidating from the outside. It wasn't covered in wings and scoops like some competitors. The styling was relatively subtle, but when the light turned green, everything changed. Opponents who dismissed the Chevelle learned their mistake quickly, usually while watching its taillights disappear. But Chevrolet wasn't just interested in straight-line speed. Engineers also focused heavily on durability. The Mark IV block architecture provided exceptional strength. The block casting was thick, material was concentrated in stress areas. The design had been proven through years of racing. 4-bolt main caps helped secure the crankshaft under extreme loads. Rather than the standard 2-bolt main caps, the LS6 used 4 bolts at the center main bearings. This distributed stress more effectively. It prevented the crankshaft from moving under extreme loads. It improved reliability. Large bearing surfaces distributed stress more effectively. The main bearings were substantial. Rod bearings were generous. Oil clearances were carefully controlled. Everything was engineered for durability. Forged steel components absorbed punishment that would destroy lesser engines. Cast pistons would have shattered. Cast crankshafts would have broken. Weak connecting rods would have bent. The forged components handled abuse that would kill other engines. The oiling system was carefully engineered to maintain lubrication during high-performance driving. Oil pressure was critical. The system needed to supply adequate flow at all RPM ranges. The pump was high capacity. The passages were large. The filter was substantial. Because once oil pressure disappeared, everything went wrong. At high RPM, bearing failures could destroy an engine within seconds. The tolerances were measured in thousandths of an inch. Without oil pressure, metal contacted metal. Friction generated heat. Heat caused expansion. Expansion caused seizure. Metal fragments would circulate through the system. Tiny pieces of bearing material would contaminate the oil. They'd score cylinder walls. They'd damage other bearings. They'd clog passages. Connecting rods could exit the block. A failed bearing would cause the connecting rod to break. The broken rod would punch through the block wall. Oil would spray everywhere. The engine would seize, and the car would coast to a stop. With a hole in the block and a ruined engine, crankshafts could seize. If bearings failed completely, the crankshaft would lock. The rotating assembly would stop, sometimes violently. Entire engines could become scrap metal almost instantly. What was once worth thousands of dollars became worthless junk in seconds. That's why proper maintenance was critical. Chevrolet's engineers understood these risks. The LS6's heavy-duty construction helped it survive abuse that would have killed weaker designs. And that's one reason enthusiasts still admire it today. Decades later, properly maintained LS6 engines still run strong. Some have hundreds of thousands of miles. Others have spent decades at the drag strip. The durability was real, but outside the engineering department, another battle was brewing, one that no amount of horsepower could solve. By 1970, the political climate was changing. Federal emissions regulations were becoming stricter. The Clean Air Act was gaining momentum. Politicians were paying attention to automotive emissions. Environmental concerns were entering mainstream conversation. Public concern about pollution was growing. Smog in major cities was visible. Air quality was declining. People were demanding change, and automobiles were an obvious target. Insurance companies had noticed the horsepower race, and they didn't like what they saw. Accident rates for high-performance cars were climbing. Young drivers were crashing powerful vehicles. Claims were mounting. Profits were threatened. Premiums for high-performance cars skyrocketed. What once cost a reasonable amount suddenly became expensive. Very expensive. Insurance for a young driver with an LS6 Chevelle could exceed the car payment. Young buyers suddenly found muscle cars difficult to insure. Some insurance companies refused coverage entirely. Others charged rates that made ownership impractical. The market was changing. At the same time, manufacturers faced increasing pressure to lower compression ratios and reduce emissions. The writing was on the wall. High-compression engines produced more emissions. They required premium fuel. They didn't meet upcoming regulations. Something had to change. For engines like the LS6, that was bad news. Very bad news. Because high-compression performance engines depended on premium fuel. They depended on aggressive tuning. They depended on the very characteristics regulators wanted removed. The golden age of muscle cars was beginning to fade. But before the curtain fell, the LS6 delivered one final statement. Chevrolet produced the 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 in relatively limited numbers. Only a few thousand examples were built. Exact production figures vary depending on the source. Some estimates suggest around 4,000 units. Others claim slightly fewer, but everyone agrees the numbers were limited. Today, surviving original LS6 cars are among the most valuable muscle cars in existence. Some have sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction. Well-documented examples command premium prices. Matching numbers cars are especially valuable. Original paint increases value. Proper documentation is essential. Others have crossed the $1 million mark when exceptionally rare documentation and provenance were involved. Special editions bring even more. Unusual color combinations add value. Celebrity ownership increases prices. The market for authentic LS6 cars is strong and getting stronger. Collectors aren't just buying a car, they're buying a moment in history. A snapshot of the exact second when American horsepower reached its peak and then everything changed. In 1971, compression ratios dropped. The LS6 returned for one final year, but it wasn't the same. Compression fell to 9.0 to 1. Horsepower dropped to 425. The magic was fading. Horsepower ratings began falling. Every manufacturer reduced output. Emissions equipment appeared. Performance declined. The era was ending. By 1972, the industry switched from gross horsepower ratings to net horsepower measurements. The numbers suddenly looked much smaller. A 1970 engine rated at 450 horsepower might be rated at 280 horsepower using the new system. The engines hadn't changed that dramatically. The measurement method had, but consumers saw the declining numbers and assumed the worst. Emissions equipment increased. Catalytic converters appeared. Air pumps were added. EGR systems became standard. Power continued falling. Fuel quality changed. Lead was being phased out. Octane ratings dropped. High compression engines could no longer run on available fuel. Insurance costs continued climbing. The muscle car market collapsed. Young buyers disappeared. Sales plummeted. Dealers struggled. The muscle car era that created the LS6 was disappearing. Production of the legendary engine ended. Factories moved on. New priorities emerged. Efficiency replaced excess. Regulations replaced freedom. And one of the greatest big blocks ever built became a memory. Or so it seemed, because legends don't really die, they evolve. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, enthusiasts searched junkyards for surviving LS6 components. Parts cars were common in the early years. Many LS6 Chevelles had been crashed. Others were worn out. Some were parted out. Smart buyers grabbed components before they disappeared. Restoration specialists hunted original cars. Barns were searched. Classified ads were studied. Leads were followed. Occasionally, someone would discover an original LS6 car sitting forgotten. Collectors paid increasingly large sums for authentic examples. The market developed slowly. Initially, these were just used cars. Then they became collectible. Then they became valuable. Now they're investments. Engine builders studied the design. The LS6 became a blueprint for performance. The cylinder head design influenced modern engines. The compression ratio proved what was possible. The component strength set standards. Racers copied the formula. Big displacement, high compression, aggressive camshafts, strong components. The LS6 formula worked, and it still works today. The LS6 became more than an engine. It became a symbol of an era when engineers were encouraged to make engines bigger, louder, and more powerful, a symbol of American performance at its most unapologetic, and perhaps most importantly, proof that there was once a time when a major manufacturer sold a 454 cubic inch 11.25 to -1 compression monster to ordinary customers. Think about that for a moment. You could walk into a dealership, sign some paperwork, and drive home with an engine producing enough torque to embarrass many race cars of its day. No special racing license, no custom order, just pure factory horsepower. That's what made the LS6 different. It wasn't merely powerful, it represented the absolute limit of what the muscle car era could become before outside forces shut the party down. Today, modern performance cars may be faster. Many produce more horsepower. Some can outrun an LS6-powered Chevelle without breaking a sweat. Technology has advanced dramatically. Turbochargers and superchargers are common. Engine management systems optimize everything. Materials are stronger, aerodynamics are better. Modern cars are remarkable machines. But numbers alone don't explain why enthusiasts still talk about the Chevy 454 LS6 more than 50 years later. It's the story, the timing, the attitude, the feeling that engineers were building something outrageous simply because they could. And when you combine a 4.25-inch bore, a 4.00-inch stroke, 454 cubic inches, 11.25 to -1 compression, 450 officially rated horsepower, and 500 pound-feet of torque, you get more than specifications. You get a legend. The Chevy 454 LS6 wasn't just another big block. It was the final roar of the original muscle car era, a machine built at the peak of America's horsepower war. A beast powerful enough to dominate drag strips, terrify competitors, and earn a place among the greatest engines ever created. And that's why, decades later, people still remember those three characters, LS6. Not because it was merely fast, but because it represented the moment when American performance stopped asking for permission. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments which legendary engine you want to see next. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the machines, rivalries, and engineering breakthroughs that changed automotive history forever.